In this video, I'm going to be dealing with the idea of constructing a central argument in an essay. And to help that description along, I'm going to use the metaphor of the legal system. Constructing an argument to convict a criminal is a lot like constructing an argument in an essay. The principles are just the same. A court case will have a number of specific ingredients. For example, there'll be somebody who will be accused of the crime. For the sake of argument, we'll talk about a murder, so there needs to be a murder victim, a murder weapon, and a crime scene. Now, all of those things will be aspects of the case. Here's one of them being addressed by the prosecutor. He's made a number of accusations about what the suspect is like. If you were doing this and you were the judge, would you start to feel that you wanted to convict Nigel? I don't think so. I think this would be tiresome very quickly. Because what he's saying is without any support. These are assertions. There's no evidence. Now, you're unlikely to do that in an A-level essay if you were writing about one of the poems that you're studying for the exam, because you've been well trained at GCSE to use quotations. But even with a quotation, well, an assertion is still an assertion. If you give the prosecutor another go at it, you'll see that these assertions are supported with some consolidation, a little bit of evidence. And there's no doubt that this is better. But it isn't a joined up argument, and it won't secure a conviction. Now here you can see the assertion is supported with evidence, so it becomes something valid, something worthwhile. But it's not developed at all. It is accurate. But it isn't very difficult to do. A list of points isn't going to get you to the result you want. It isn't a developed argument and won't achieve a high grade, and it won't convict Nigel. Here are 4 elements of a court case. Now you could write about each one in turn, or if you were the prosecutor you could speak about each one in turn. But every point you make about one aspect, if it's remote from the other 3, isn't really going to achieve you the result you're looking for. It's too easily disregarded. It doesn't build any momentum until it's linked up with points about the other aspects. It's actually the connections between the different aspects of an argument that are your main input. Give the prosecutor another chance and tell him that he's got to address several different elements of the case in a joined up way. Lo and behold, the points start to seem stronger. The things he has to say are more convincing. Whenever you see a detective show on TV, these are the kinds of things that the detectives talk about. Motive, means, opportunity. Those are the way in which they create theories enabling them to connect a suspect to the different elements of the case. Now, if you take yourself back to the idea of an English literature essay again, you'll see that something very similar happens. You'll have some quotations in there. Those are your evidence. But it's how you place those quotations and stitch between them to make a sort of a coherent essay that really is the mark of a good quality piece of English literature criticism. See, you could talk about the murder weapon all day. Until you can prove that Nigel used it, Nigel hasn't got anything to worry about. And even if you can say that it's definitely his, you'd have to prove who he used it on and where he was. You could prove that Nigel was in the room, but until you convict him, you can connect him to the victim and the weapon, you still haven't got an argument, you haven't got a case. So this is what it might look like in an English literature essay. If you're doing a comparative piece comparing two poems, you've got points to make about each one, and hopefully you know enough to be able to pick from the same sort of aspect as you go from one paragraph to the other. So you pick on a particular aspect of the Darkling Thrush and Ode to Autumn. And then what you try and do is you try and bring the two closer together. You try and find a relationship between those two elements. If you look at that passage again, use the pause button, rewind to that passage again, and you'll see that there are connections within the connections. And this is how it might look if you were dealing with a court case. You'll notice it's a much more sophisticated way of expressing ideas. Here's that example again. It's much more economically expressed than ordinary prose. It's packed full of relationships between different aspects. And the quotations, of course, they have to be very short in order to make a piece of criticism like that work. In actual fact, the obsession that we have with quotation can sometimes cause difficulty in this area because long quotations can actually get in the way. I hope you've recognised that creating a coherent argument is a really important aspect of essay writing. Now, I'm going to offer you two diagrams here which might illustrate the kind of structure we're talking about. The chain being simple links 1, 2, 3. But this DNA strand, I think, is a really useful way of illustrating the idea that there are links between the links. It's not just a straight sequence 1, 2, 3. Next time, I'll be dealing with quotations. Keep revising.